Your blood sugar is dropping, and you have absolutely no idea it is happening. Not because you are not paying attention, not because you are not trying, but because the real signs are not what any standard patient handout has ever described. They are not blurry vision. They are not excessive thirst. Those are the signs of blood sugar going up. I am talking about something different. I am talking about the 8 things that happen inside your body when glucose control is finally improving. Enough that people assume something is wrong. I have been practicing metabolic medicine for 21 years. In that time, I have watched hundreds of patients make real measurable progress on blood sugar came, and then panic, call my office, or quietly assume their protocol was failing Dow's, because the signs of improvement looked nothing like what they expected. One of them, a 68-year-old retired engineer from Tampa named Walter, called me convinced he was developing a new condition. When your blood sugar begins to stabilize, when insulin resistance starts to reverse and your glucose curve flattens out, your body goes through an adjustment period. I've been running on chronically elevated glucose for years, have to recalibrate. Hormonal signals that were suppressed start coming back online. Some of them feel strange. Almost none of them feel like what you would describe as getting better. Number 4 on this list is the one that generates the most alarmed. Stay with me until we get there. Here's what this video is going to give you. First, the 8 specific physical and neurological signs that indicate blood sugar is genuinely coming down days, not just fluctuating, but trending toward health. Second, the mechanism behind each sign why improving glucose metabolism produces these specific experiences, explained in plain clinical language. Third, 3 composite patient cases from my practice that show how these signs appear in real people with different metabolic histories. Things you can do in the next 7 days to accelerate the process and confirm the direction is right. Fifth, one advanced strategy that almost no physician will mention during it and that my patients consistently report makes the biggest difference in the first 30 days. Do not close this tab. The sign at number 4 has sent 21 years of clinical experience treating adults over 50 for insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and the broader constellation of metabolic dysfunction was permanent and irreversible. Many of them were wrong about that. What they needed was not a different drug. What they needed was a clear map of what the recovery process actually looks and feels like home. Because without that map, most people quit exactly when the biology is starting to work in their favor. That is what this video is. Walter is 6 to 8 years old. He spent 32 years as a structural engineer in the Tampa Bay area, the kind of man who calibrated stress tolerances on bridges for a living, and expected the same precision from his own health. When he came to my office 18 months ago, his fasting blood glucose was 147. His hemoglobin A1C was 7.8. His fasting insulin was 24 and are 3 times the optimal range. His doctor had told him the trajectory was clear. He wanted to understand the mechanism first. So we built a protocol. Not an extreme protocol, no fasting for 48 days, a specific movement framework, a targeted supplement stack, and daily glucose monitoring using a continuous glucose monitor he wore. Walter called my office. Not with good news, he thought, with concern. He told my assistant he was experiencing more vividly than he had in years, waking up briefly around 3 or 4 in the morning before falling back asleep, which he had never done before. He was urinating more frequently, not dramatically, but noticeably. He had developed a low-grade headache that sat at the back of his skull, unpredictable tan. Some mornings he was not hungry at all. Other mornings he was hungry in a way that felt different from his normal hunger. He told me he had noticed himself sweating lightly during activities that had never made him sweat before. A slow walk around the block, reading in his chair after dinner. He had made a list. He had written down 7 separate observations in the engineering notebook he kept on his nightstand. I looked at the list. Then I looked at continuous glucose monitor data from the same 3-week period. His average glucose had dropped from 138 to 109. His glucose variability, the width of, the swings from high to low throughout the day had narrowed by 31%. His fasting glucose first thing in the morning had come down from 141 to 117. Walter was not developing a new condition. Walter was healing. Every single item on his handwritten list, body adjusting to running on lower, more stable fuel. I told him what I am about to tell you. To understand why improvers, you need to understand what chronically elevated glucose does to the body over time, DLs, because improvement means reversing all of it simultaneously. The kidneys recalibrate their reabsorption threshold. The nervous system adjusts its baseline sensitivity. The adrenal glands shifts to accommodate glucose-driven cortisol patterns. Even sweat gland regulation is altered by autonomic nervous system change system around chronically elevated glucose. It is not healthy. But unstable systems resist change, and insulin begins to function more efficiently. Every one of those compensatory adaptations, that produces exactly the kinds of signals Walter documented in his notebook. The medical term for this adjustment window is metabolic calibration, lifestyle intervention, because most physicians do not expect the intervention to produce fast enough results to make it relevant. When it does produce fast results, the patient is often on their own. Here is the map. Sign 1, sleep changes, including more vivid dreams and brief early morning waking, when of sleep, particularly the stages associated with memory consolidation and dream activity. As glucose stabilizes, the vivid dreams Walter described are a return of REM stage intensity that had been muted for years. The brief early morning is natural cortisol rise that was previously masked by glucose-driven hormonal blunting. This waking is temporary. It resolves within. If you are waking up briefly at 3 or 4 in the morning and then falling back asleep easily, and this is new that is not insomnia. That may be your nervous system coming back online. Sign 2, increased urination frequency, particularly in the morning. This one surprises people because. But here is the clinical distinction. High glucose urination is driven by osmotic load. The kidneys are pulling excess water out of the blood, frequent throughout the day, and accompanied by thirst. What happens when glucose comes down is different. The kidneys are adjusting back toward their lower glucose set point. During that adjustment, fluid handling temporarily becomes more active. It resolves within 10 to 14 days in most cases. If your urine pattern has changed and you are not thirstier than usual, and your glucose numbers are improving on your monitor graph, this is not a kidney problem. This is a kidney recalibrating. Sign 3, a dull, low-grade headache at the back of the skull lasting 2 to 5 days. Cerebral blood flow is partially regulated by glucose availability. The brain has been running on a consistently higher fuel environment for months. There is a brief period of vascular adjustment, the smooth muscle in cerebral blood vessels that had tone calibrated around, typically at the occipital base, the back and lower portion of the skull view, that is not sharp, not severe, and does not respond dramatically to standard pain relievers. It resolves on its own within 2 to 5 days. This is not a dangerous headache. It is a headache produced by recalibration of is the right response. Sign 4, appetite changes that feel strange and unfamiliar chaos. Specifically, the most concerned calls to my office. And it is, counterintuitively, one of the clearest indicators that real metabolic progress is occurring. Because cells cannot effectively absorb glucose, the brain receives hunger signals even in a well-fed state. The result is a type of urgent hunger towards food that is present almost constantly. When insulin resistance begins to reverse, that hunger signal attenuates, somewhat disconnected from actual meals, and hard to satisfy with reasonable food amounts. Many patients describe it as a background. Several of my patients have described it as a hollowness, of a strange quiet where the hunger noise used to be. Some have worried they were losing their appetite in a pathological way. One patient, Dorothy, 64, a retired pharmacist from Scottsdale, told me she was alarmed because she had gone from thinking about food almost constantly to some mornings not thinking about it. The quiet was her brain no longer fighting itself. It was the absence of internal chatter, receiving false hunger signals from insulin-resistant cells. The quiet was metabolic improvement. If you have lost the urgent and resolves cleanly that is sign 4. It may feel strange. It is not something to reverse. This one requires nuance. Fatigue is a sign of many things, most of them unwelcome. But there is a specific fatigue pattern. It is mild TICE, not the fatigue that prevents activity, but a reduction in baseline energy level and resolves by day 14. The mechanism is this. Cells that have been receiving fuel primarily via elevated moderate glucose more effectively. During that transition, mitochondrial function undergoes a brief adjustment. Mitochondria that were cost shows up as a temporary reduction in baseline vitality. This is not the right time to abandon the protocol. This is the protocol working. Sign 6, changes in taste perception. Food that was previously satisfying now tastes too sweet. Taste receptor sensitivity to sweetness is regulated partly by insulin signaling. Sweetness receptors in the mouth and gut downregulate their sensitivity. They adapt to the higher sweet environment. Food cravings escalate in metabolic dysfunction. The system requires more input to feel satisfied. As insulin function improves, normal tasting claim, a piece of fruit, a small amount of yogurt, a cracker tout, may begin to taste noticeably, sometimes uncomfortable. Others describe it as a kind of mild aversion to foods they used to enjoy without any particular reaction. It is evidence that taste regulation is returning to a lower glucose set point. Sign 7, mild light sweating during altered by long-standing insulin resistance. Sweating patterns shift. Many patients with metabolic dysfunction sweat heavily during high-effort activity, produce some thermoregulatory response. As insulin resistance reverses, autonomic function begins to normalize. The sweat gland time in a warm room, mild exertion that previously produced no sweating at all. This is not a cardiovascular event. It is not a fever response. It is thermoregulation coming back online after years of autonomic dysfunction. Walter's after-dinner sweating during reading was this sign exactly. He was recovering autonomic function. Sign 8, a brief period of mood lightness or emotional volatility in the first 2 weeks. This is the subtlest sign. The brain runs on glucose. More specifically, the mood-regulating and emotional processing centers of the brain. Chronic glucose elevation followed by erratic dips produces a low-grade neurological stress state that manifests as when glucose stabilizes and insulin function improves, the brain begins receiving more consistent fuel delivery. The adjustment primes, a few days of uncharacteristic lightness, followed by a few days of mild irritability, followed the first time in years they woke up without a background feeling of low-grade resistance to the day. This is not a psychological event. It is a neurological one. And his engineering training made him document rather than panic. His continuous glucose monitor data confirmed that every was 102. His A1C at 12 weeks was 6.4. He kept the notebook. He brings it to every follow-up. Dorothy, 6'4", Scottsdale Harr, the appetite shift. Dorothy came to my practice after 15 years on and off dietary interventions that never produced lasting change. It was 6.1 the fray, but she was deep in the pre-diabetic range and, by her own description, thinking about food almost every waking hour. We started a low glycemic protocol, added berberine, but a plant-based compound with well-documented insulin-sensitizing properties to her daily supplement regimen. At day 9, it was causing some kind of appetite suppression that she should be concerned about. She described the absence of constant food thoughts as feeling like something had been turned off. I called her directly. We reviewed her glucose data together. Her average morning fasting glucose had moved from 122 to 108 in 9 days. I told her what sign 4 means. I told her the quiet was not a side effect. The quiet was the point. Dorothy's fasting insulin was 9 at her 8-week check. She has not had a day background food noise since week 3. James, 7th one, Portland down, the taste shift. James is a retired civil attorney, managed with metformin, and a secondary complaint that his diet had become progressively joyless. Not because of restriction, but it didn't taste like anything anymore. His words were, things taste like a slightly flavored version of nothing. His fasting glucose was 151. His sweetness receptor sensitivity had been suppressed by years of elevated glucose to the point that the flavor attenuation was measurable. We structured a protocol with a primary goal of glucose variability reduction, flattening the spikes. Within 3 weeks, James reported something he described as disorienting. The fruit he ate with breakfast now tasted aggressively sweet, almost uncomfortably so. I told him sign 6 was working exactly as intended. At month 3, James reported that food tasted more like food than it had in a decade. It had dropped by 44%. Here's exactly what to do, starting this week, to move in the right direction and conform these signs when they appear. Action 1. Get a continuous glucose monitor and read the trend line, not just the number. A single fasting glucose reading tells you one data point. What tells you whether your blood sugar is genuinely improving is the trend line over 14 days, the direction of average glucose, the narrowing of variability, the flattening of post-meal spikes. Brands like Dexcom and Abbott Libre offer short-term monitoring options. Wear one for 2 weeks, is down by 5 to 10 points over 2 weeks, the protocol is working well, even if you feel strange. Action 2. Log any new symptom against your glucose data the same day it appears. Do what Walter did. Keep a notebook of physical or digital counts and write down any new physical observation the same day it occurs. Then put up your CGM data for that day and the 3 days preceding. Most of the signs in this video will correlate precisely with improving glucose numbers. That correlation is the evidence that what you are experiencing is recalibration, not regression. Documentation transforms a source of anxiety into carbohydrates for the first 30 days. The fastest way to narrow glucose variability is to eliminate the inputs that produce the largest spikes. Pastries penna produce acute glucose surges that widen variability and delay recalibration. Replace a minimal glucose response and a satiety signal that extends 2 to 4 hours. For the first 30 days, keep breakfast carbohydrates under 20 grams and observe how your CGM trendline responds within 7-2 hours. Action 4. Add a 10-minute walk within 30 minutes of your 2 largest meals. Post-meal movement. Skeletal muscle contraction opens glucose transport channels in a way that is independent of insulin. This means even in an insulin-resistant state, A 10-minute walk after dinner, specifically, can blunt the post-dinner spike by 30 to 40% in many patients, and it works within the first week. Action 5. If you experience the headache in sign 3, increase water intake to 96 ounces per day for 5 days. The occipital headache of recalibration is real and can be uncomfortable. Hydration significantly reduces its severity and duration. 65 run chronically without recognizing it. 96 ounces of water per day spread across the waking hours is the clinical threshold that produces the most consistent symptom relief. Do not use it as a prompt to drink more water. It will resolve within 5 days in almost every case. Here is the protocol. Advanced move that almost no standard follow-up appointment covers. Track your fasting glucose at the same time every morning. Not just any morning, but every single morning for 30 consecutive days. Write the number down. At the end of 30 days, calculate the average of the first 7 days and the average of the last 7 days. If the second average is lower than the first by 5 or more points, you have confirmed a genuine downward trend. This matters because daily glucose fluctuates to the previous evening's dinner. A single number, or even a week of numbers, can mislead. 30 days cannot lie. The 30-day average is the most. Your protocol is producing the biological outcome you are after. Most of my patients who do this exercise for the first time are surprised. The numbers they thought were random are not random. The downward trend, once visible across a 30-day window, is clear and consistent. And seeing it in your own data is, I have found, more powerful than any symptom, more powerful than anything I can tell you in a video. Before I close, I want to make sure you have the resource I put together specifically for this video. It is called the 30-Day Glucose Recalibration Tracker. It is a free downloadable guide that includes the sign track, plus the 30-day morning glucose log with the 7-day average calculation built in, and a 1-page reference sheet showing exactly which signs correspond to which recalibration mechanisms. So you are never guessing. You can download it at the link in the description below. There is no purchase required. It is there because the gap between understanding what these signs mean and actually having a tool to track them is where most people lose confidence. The tracker closes that gap. The link is in the description. Download it today. Use it starting tomorrow morning. One more thing before I close, and I want to be transparent about this. Several of my patients too, including Dorothy, whose case I described earlier, have incorporated berberine into their metabolic protocol with significant results. Berberine is a plant-derived compound with which functions similarly to the signaling pathway activated by metformin, the most commonly prescribed diabetes medication. And what I'm telling you is that the research on berberine and blood sugar is substantial, and the product formulation matters. The brand I consistently recommend to my patients who want to add it is Thorne. Thorne's berberine is third-party tested, properly dosed, and manufactured to pharmaceutical-grade standards. There is a link in the description. I receive a small commission purchased through that link, which I am disclosing clearly. My clinical recommendation does not change based on that. I recommend Thorne berberine because the formulation is what I would take myself. Let me bring this back to Walter. At his 12-week appointment, Walter walked in with his engineering notebook. He had logged 261 He had annotated the days when the strange symptoms appeared. He had drawn a line through each one as it resolved. The notebook looked exactly like something a structural engineer would produce when tasked with documenting the stress tolerance of a system under change. His A1C was 6.4, down from 7.8. He did not feel like he was on a diet. He felt like he understood what was happening inside his own body for the first time in years. That understanding was the difference between quitting at week 3, when the symptoms felt alarming, and arriving at week 12 with data that confirmed what the biology was doing all along. You now have the same map Walter had at week 3. The 8 signs are not complications, they are confirmation. Headache appears and disappears, but those are not reasons to stop. Those are the biology working. If this video gave you something useful, please like it. It tells the algorithm that this kind of clinical content belongs in front of people who need it, not buried under content that tells people what they want to hear rather than what their metabolic system is actually doing. And if you are not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe because we publish this level of detail on metabolic health for adults over 50 every week. I wish every patient got told before their protocol began. Send this video to someone you know who has started changing their diet or lifestyle for blood sugar reasons and who has complained recently that something feels off or that they are not sure it is working. In almost every case, what they are experiencing is on this list. In almost every case, they are closer to the answer than they think. I will see you in the next video.